Hey guys, and happy Tuesday. Welcome back. Here we are with episode 42. I promise I can make words, guys. Occasionally I stumble upon them, but I can actually form full sentences. So today, guys, I'm going to talk to you about a 2006 film called Let's Go to Prison. It's a great little comedy, and I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. I meant to do a double feature. That was the game plan. I was going to record Sunday, and I was going to talk about this film and a movie called Big Stan, starring Rob Schneider. Um, but unfortunately, weekend had some stuff that kept me kind of busy, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So here we are, Tuesday. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record this episode today, Tuesday. I'm hoping to record a comic book episode, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, uh, maybe tomorrow or Thursday. And then potentially by Friday or Saturday, I should have Big Stan, the next episode. So that's the game plan for the week. I hope you guys are doing good and you had a good weekend. I am going to talk to you guys a little bit about what I watched. I didn't watch a ton of stuff, but I did watch a couple of things that I thought were interesting. The first thing I'll talk about is Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, I'm sure most of you guys have seen this based off what it did at the box office this week, and apparently it did some ridiculous number, which I didn't write down because I'm too lazy. But I do remember reading that it was some ginormous number. Of course, this is starring Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and our man Ryan Reynolds back for the third time, or actually fourth time in his tights, if you count the Wolverine movie that he made years ago, which we all try to forget about, or at least I do. Just my own opinion. And it's a really funny comedy, guys. I mean, it's best. They compared it to um, when I read an article online. They said the creators were going for a trains, planes, and automobile road trip kind of comedy vibe, and that's the kind of feel they were going for. Ryan Reynolds is a huge fan of John Candy, and I can kind of see it. Definitely a road trip movie. Um, Now I know some people will be like, "Fuck, I don't want to compare it to train, planes, and automobiles," because as far as comedy goes, most people that have good taste, at least in my opinion, will think that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a comedic masterpiece. At least I think it's a fantastic film. But I think this film really succeeds. I know some people have had issues with saying some of the emotional impact that maybe the first or two films might have had. This film was a little bit lacking in that department. I don't know. I mean, I think it wasn't as important because I think they were focusing on comedy and they were focusing on action and they were focusing on the dynamic. They were focusing on the dynamic between Deadpool and Wolverine, and that was the primary focus. I mean, the relationship he has with Marina Baccarin, eh, I won't go into details. It's there in the beginning. She shows up and she shows up in the end. Big Al shows, his roommate, the blind lady, she shows up in the beginning and the end. And it is primarily an action comedy. There are I think, some emotional moments in the film. I think sprinkled in throughout the comedy, and the cameos, there is some commentary to be had. Um, I think it's a blast and just a fun time. Let's face it, Ryan Reynolds is born for this role. Hugh Jackman was born for Wolverine, and I'm so glad that he's back. Um, I know a lot of people loved that last Wolverine movie, and I'm going to be 150% honest with you guys. Um, I thought that movie was excellent, but, and again, I know I'm going to be nitpicking here. I take issue with the whole clone thing. I just feel like they could have come up with something a little more interesting. And again, I know I sound like an asshole because I'm nitpicking. It's such a minor thing. Um, and I get it. They have to come up with something interesting that he's going to fight. And I do think the rest of the movie is phenomenal. But that kind of detracted me a little bit from that particular movie. And I know I'm one of the few people, so I do get why some people um, aren't in love with this movie. Um, but it checked off all the boxes for me. It was a team up that It was awesome to see. They both inhibit their characters so well. They live and breathe the characters so well. And when you put the two characters together, it's instant comedy gold. It just works. And I think it's also enhanced by the fact that their real life friendship, uh, really shows on the big screen, at least in my opinion. So definitely check that out. Sean Levy, some of you guys probably know him from stuff like Night at the Museum. He did those three movies. Free Guy, Date Night. He did his first film in '97, which I've never seen, called Just in Time, and he's done a bunch of other stuff, producing, directing, writing. Um, I think it's worth your time, guys. I think it's a real blast. I wouldn't say it's a perfect film by any means, but I think it comes close to the higher echelon films. I mean, for me, the one that's always going to be like the one that I love without a doubt, are the original '89 Batman. Part of that's because I've always loved Michael Keaton, probably ever since I saw him in stuff like Mr. Mom and Gung Ho and some of those type of films. Um, so that's probably one of my all-time favorites. Obviously, the original OG Superman, Christopher Reeves. The first two movies, I know some people will not give the second one any credit, but I saw both cuts. The second film, I love the second film just as much as the first one. Um, and I'm going to say something blasphemous, but Watchmen, guys. I didn't see the new interpretation that HBO did, but that one they did back in what 2007, 2008. I thought that was a fucking phenomenal film, man, and I think some people forget about that when they shit all over Snyder. And don't get me wrong, he's done some films that deserve to be shit on. I get it, trust me, I do. Um, Part of it is, of course, as I've also said many times, I'm a huge Billy Crudup fan. He played Doctor Manhattan. I love that character. I think he did that character justice, and he did a wonderful job, as well as the whole cast. I know they changed the ending compared to the comic book, but you know what? I get it. Sometimes you have to do that, and if it works, it works. And I think that film really works. At least for me, it works. Of course, there's other films like V for Vendetta, which I think it's a comic book. It's not your typical superhero per se, but let's face it, that's a fantastic film, and I think it deserves more love and more credit. There's a lot of different things, but I think this film comes really close, to that level. And I know people are going to be like, "Yeah, what? Get the fuck out of here! Come close to the original Superman, close to the original Batman." Keep in mind, guys, I love drama. I love action. I love foreign films. I love different horror films, sci-fi, all different genres. But um, I love all that stuff. That said, I will always love comedy, probably above everything else. And I think part of that is just I love to laugh. Um, and I love dumb comedies. I love dark comedies. I love slapstick. Um, and I feel like, and I'm being the cynical old man here, but I feel like there's not enough fantastically well written, laugh your ass off comedies out there. There are a handful that are out there, but not a ton. And I laugh my ass off this movie. And I'm always going to be one to promote a comedy. Um, that's why I'm talking about Let's Go to Prison. So that kind of wraps up what I think about Deadpool and Wolverine in a nutshell. I'm not going to go into everything. I don't want to spoil it for some of you that may have not seen it. I also started watching, and I'm only 4 episodes in, so keep this in mind when I talk about it. Watched a series that came out in '67 to '68. Had 17 episodes. It's called The Prisoner, and it's basically the premise is you have a British agent that quits abruptly from his job. Um, you don't know why. He goes back to his apartment. He starts packing up. He's about to get the fuck out of Dodge, and he gets gassed and abducted to this island. And the island is surrounded by water everywhere. He's assigned a number 6, and he quickly learns that everyone on this island is assigned a different number, and they're all there because they've done different things where they had to be kind of tucked away on this island. And he doesn't know why he's there. I mean, when he confronts somebody, they tell him he's there because he did something against the government. They know he's holding a secret, and he won't tell what it is. And basically, whole idea is the idea of independence and being held against your will, and he's just wanting to try to escape. Now, I'm only 4 episodes in, and I'm probably not doing the best job of explaining this series, but part of it is because I'm only 4 episodes in. So there's 17 episodes total. It stars, excuse me, a guy named Patrick McGugahan. Hopefully, I'm getting your last name right, Patrick. The 4 episodes I've seen are very compelling. I'm very interested. It's really solid. I know in the I want to say late 2000s, maybe 2015, 16, they remade it or did a reinterpretation of it with Jim Caviezel. And I think he's an interesting actor, a little full of himself, but an interesting actor nonetheless. And I'm curious to see his take on the character and what they did with it. Um, but yeah, it's a pretty compelling show from what I've seen so far, and I would definitely check it out if you guys get a chance. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I've watched, guys. So I will now take a minute and talk to you about Let's Go to Prison. I'll talk to you a little bit about some of our behind the scenes people and stuff like that. So this film came out in 2006, guys. It was made for about $4 million, and it ended up grossing about 4.6 at the box office. So it didn't make a lot of money. My guess is after advertising costs and stuff like that, it probably didn't make its budget back. So for you Not a Bomb guys, it probably would be on your show, Brad and Troy. It definitely qualifies. But I think it's a really funny film. And I'm going to go into a little bit of that in a minute. According to Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 12% based on 41 reviews. So 12% is not very good. Now, I've never really respected Rotten Tomatoes. I've always thought it was a bunch of bullshit, but I did think it was interesting to mention that. Also, Metacritic gave it a score of 27 out of 100, so they're slightly higher. Um, from 13 critics giving it generally bad reviews. The general opinion was that the film was guilty of cliche setups, base humor, and failure to elicit laughs. Guys, I just don't get it. It's not a perfect film, I will say that, guys. But it's a pretty funny film, and I love a lot of the cast and people involved. Um, Directing, we have our man Bob Odenkirk. A lot of you guys probably know Bob from Better Call Saul, or Breaking Bad. He's been in a ton of stuff. He was in that action film Nobody that came out a couple of years, which was phenomenal. He was born and raised in Illinois, and he went to school at the Southern Illinois University of Carbondale. 3 credits shy of graduation, he dropped out and he moved to Chicago. He began trying his hand at open mic stand up comedy, and that's something he would do for several years. In Chicago, he became friends with a gentleman named Robert Schmiegel. Robert Schmiegel worked for Saturday Night Live. Some of you guys may know him from what's that puppet, the dog, and with the cigar in his mouth. I can't remember his name, and I should have wrote this down. But you guys probably know what I'm talking about. I don't know why I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's going to bother me. But anyway, he became friends with Robert Schmiegel, and Robert Schmiegel ended up getting him a job working for Saturday Night Live as a writer in 1975. And he worked for quite a few years for Saturday Night Live as a writer. In '89, he went on to win an Emmy for his writing on the show. Uh, and then in 1990, he worked on a short lived show called Get a Life, starring another Saturday Night Live guy, Chris Elliott. Now, this didn't last very long, and this is a hilarious show. I love Chris Elliott, another guy. I think most people remember him from a couple of the scary movies, but he was on Saturday Night Live for a little bit. He was in a hilarious movie, in my opinion, called Cabin Boy, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff. And it's basically this show about this guy that's in his 40s, that's living with his parents, and he has a paper route, and he's kind of considered a loser, I guess, if you will. He would go on to work on the 1992 television show, The Dennis Miller Show. This would be a big moment because it would mark his first time acting as well as writing and doing stand-up comedy. Ben Stiller noticed him on this, and Ben Stiller recruited him for his show, which is another short-lived show, which is called The Ben Stiller Show. Unfortunately, that show was canceled after just one season, sadly, but it did snag our man an Emmy. So another Emmy. The guy's not doing too bad, you know. He'd go on to act in stuff like The Larry Sanders Show. He also wrote for The Conan O'Brien Show. And then in 1995, he got his own show with comedian David Cross called Mr. Show with Bob and David. That show lasted for 4 seasons. And after that show ended, he wrote and directed 3 films. He wrote Melvin Goes to Dinner, which came out in 2003, which I have not seen, but I saw the trailer and it looks pretty funny. He did this movie in '06, Let's Go to Prison, and he did The Brothers Solomon, which came out in '07. Um, so he's done a ton of television stuff as well, directing. He's done obviously Mr. Show, Melvin Goes to Prisoner, Let's Go to Prison, The Brother Solomon. He directed that movie 43, Their Birthday Boys, which is a TV movie, and another TV movie called The Near Future. So he's done a handful of television stuff as well, directing. On the writing end, he wrote for the Dennis Miller Show, the Ben Stiller Show, the Dana Carvey Show, Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist, you know, that animated show. I don't know if you guys remember ever seeing that one. Um, Tenacious D, Girlfriend's Day in 2017. And he's also writing the script for Nobody 2, which is currently in pre-production. When we get into his acting career, he did stuff like Roseanne, Wayne's World 2, Seinfeld, News Radio, Relative Strangers in '06, Take Me Home Tonight in 2011, The Spectacular Now in 2013, Nebraska in 2013, Breaking Bad, Breaking. I almost said Breaking Brad. Yeah, see what you guys have done to me. Not a bomb. They have a spinoff show called Breaking Brad, and every time I go to see Breaking Bad, I sometimes catch myself because I almost call it Breaking Brad. See how you guys have influenced me, guys. So he was in that for 43 episodes. He was in the Fargo TV series, the film The Disaster Artist, The Incredibles 2, the film Nobody in 2021, and he was in the spinoff show of Breaking Bad, not Breaking Brad, but Breaking Bad, where he was the lead character, and that was 63 episodes. I think it ran for 5 or 6 seasons. I want to say 5 seasons. Um, Now, when we get to our writers, we have 2 gentlemen. We have a guy named, or actually, I think we have more than that. Pardon me. I spoke too soon. There's like 3 or 4 writers. We have Jim Hogshire, who wrote the book, which this movie was based off of. He wrote the novel You Are Going to Prison. And the film is loosely based on this. I think the book diverges a little more and goes into obviously a lot more detail because it's a book, it's not a screenplay. But they took the general premise of that. So that's why he has a screenplay credit in this. We have a gentleman named Robert Ben Garant. Robert Ben Garant did a screenplay called I'm Your Man. Oh, no, sorry, that's not a screenplay, guys. It's a video game, which came out in '92. He did the film Taxi, which came out in '04. The Pacifier, which came out in '05. Reno 911, the television show. He wrote a bunch of that. Balls of Fury, which came out in '07. Night of the Museum, which came out in '06. Baywatch movie, which came out in 2017, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm not going to go into their entire resume, but give you a general idea of some of the stuff he worked on. We have the gentleman Thomas Lennon. Now, if that name sounds familiar, guys, you guys probably know Thomas Lennon for his acting. He's been in stuff like Reno 911, Friends. Believe it or not, he was in the movie Memento. He had a brief scene. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. I Love You Man, which came out in '09. Cedar Rapids, which came out in 2011. That, guys, is an underrated comedy, which I recommend you guys highly check out. And a bunch of other stuff. But a lot of people, including myself, didn't realize he was also a screenwriter. And he wrote The Pacifier as well, Taxi, Night at the Museum, um, Balls of Fury, Hell Baby, Baywatch, 2017 movie, and the Reno 911 TV series. He did a lot of writing for that. So he's got quite a bit going on as far as the writing and the acting. And they say, a lot of times, if you don't like your career in Hollywood as an actor, you should become a writer because you can write a screenplay for a film or a television show and you can pitch it. And, like a lot of actors have done in the past, say, hey, listen, I want to be attached to this project in some way or form as a writer and an actor. And if you want to buy it from me, you have to have me as an actor, not just the writer. Plus, you get two paychecks. So you can kind of see why that's a smart move. A lot of people have done that. I know Stallone did that for the original Rocky. He was like, listen, I'm not going to sell you the screenplay unless you attach me as an actor. I want to be the lead. So it's smart thinking, and you can kind of see why a lot of actors become writers. I'm sure they become writers for many different reasons, but that's a good reason if you want to pivot your career a little bit. Next, we have a guy named Michael Patrick Jan. He wrote uh, you you wrote it, you watch it, a TV series that came out in '92. The State, which is another television show. He wrote Let's Go to Prison. He also was a director for You Wrote It, You Watch It, and The State. He directed Drop Dead Gorgeous, which came out in '99. A bunch of the Reno 911 episodes. The show The Good Doctor, which I was a fan of. He directed 3 of those episodes. He did another wonderful show that I'm a fan of, which is called Atypical, which is on Netflix, and a movie that came out in 2023 called The Oregon Trail. Um, so those are our screenwriters. Moving on, we have our cinematographer. This gentleman is a gentleman called Ramsey Nichol. There's a name for you guys. Never heard of anybody being called a Ramsey, let alone Ramsey Nichol. Kind of has a nice ring to it though. So I won't make fun of Ramsey's name. He worked on a ton of music videos, stuff like Sugar Ray, bands like Filter, Smash Mouth, Korn, The Offspring, Metallica, Green Day. He also was the cinematographer for the film Pretty Persuasion, which came out in '05. That is a very dark, I would say, comedy. There are some dramatic moments in that film. Definitely check that out, guys. It's a good film. Another one was a television show called The Passage, which was a very short-lived TV series based off a fantastic set of books um, by a writer called Justin Cronin. It's like a vampire trilogy. Books are amazing. The TV series, like I said, was, I thought, pretty damn good, and I would have loved to seen them continue with it. Definitely check that out. And he did another Ryan Reynolds film. He did the cinematography for a film called Chaos Theory, which came out in '07, which is a little indie comedy. And it's also another film that I think probably doesn't get much love when we're talking about Ryan Reynolds and his filmography. Um, so check that out. Our editor is a guy named Eric L. Beeson, and Eric worked on stuff like Sneaky Pete, the TV show with Giovanni Ribisi. He's done stuff like The Last Seduction in '94, Unforgettable in '96, A Simple Plan, Joyride, The Rookie, The Alamo, The Possession, and Don't Breathe. So he has a nice little filmography there. Also, a fellow co-editor, we have Dennis Thorlaxson. Now, he doesn't have a huge filmography. He did a film in '04 called Seek and Hide. I know you would have thought it'd been Hide and Seek, a little more catchy, but who knows? Who am I to criticize what they named this film? And also, he edited Let's Go to Prison. So there's not a lot under his editing credits. He did a bunch of stuff as an assistant editor, but I didn't bother to write that down because I didn't think it was that relevant. Music is by a gentleman called Alan Elliott. Alan has worked on films like Secret Window in '04, Hitch in '05, Man of the House in '05, Guess Who in '05, um, stuff like that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of the behind the scenes, people. Now, when we get into our cast, guys, I'm going to talk about one of our leads, which is Dax Shepard. Now, Dax Shepard, you guys have probably seen him in a ton of stuff. He has a very successful podcast that I think he's been running for maybe 7 or 8 years now called Armchair Expert. I honestly became a huge fan of him um, through that podcast. It's with him and a girl named Monica Padme, I believe is her name. Hopefully, I'm getting that right, Monica. And it's a great podcast where they interview different people in the industry, actors, writers, directors. But they also introduce regular people. They have like anthropologists, they have archaeologists, psychologists. They give you a little bit of everything, and they even have like a wild card episode. Like once a week, they'll talk about like people write in different stories, and they talk to different people. Like that time you shit yourself. Like literally, that was an episode, and they talk to people about embarrassing situations like that or worst vacation. So they have a lot of interaction with their fans as well. So I became a really big fan of him through the podcast mainly. I was aware of him earlier in his career. He started his career doing a reality show for MTV called Punked. You guys probably remember the show. Ashton Kutcher created it, and he was one of the hosts that was on that show, and that was like his first big break. He plays the character of a guy named John Lashitsky, and John Lashitsky is a career criminal, and this is his third time going to prison. This time it's to get to revenge against a gentleman called Nelson Biederman. Um, Nelson Biederman the fourth. His father is a judge, and his father put him in jail. So he's out for revenge against his son Nelson, and I'll tell you why he's out for revenge against his son and not his father in a little bit. Um, Back to Dax Shepard. So yeah, Punked was his first big debut on the world of acting and television. He'd go on to work on films like Let's Go to Prison, like I said, Zathura, which came out in '05, um, and a film called Idiocracy. You guys probably remember that one. That's directed by Mike Judge. He played a character called Frito. Yes, I'm not going to lie, a character named Frito. Um, he was in a movie called Employee of the Month, which came out in 2006 as well. Um, Baby Mama, which came out in '08. Smother, which came out in '08. Old Dogs, which came out in '09. And Hit and Run, which came out in 2012. And The Judge, which came out in 2014. Um, he did his first feature film in 2004, Without a Paddle, and that was a big deal because that was his first time transitioning. He had done the show Punked, but if you guys remember that show, the reason that he was picked because he wasn't unknown, but the problem was people started to recognize him, and because it was a prank show, after the first season, they had to replace him if they wanted to keep the pranks going, because otherwise people would recognize him and go, oh, okay, I'm being punked. Um, so he went through a period of time where he was just known as a reality guy, and I think it kind of took a toll on his psyche a little bit. And he talked about that in Armchair Expert, and he wasn't being taken as a serious actor. And then he went through a lot of auditions, like a lot of struggling actors do. And he finally got Without a Paddle in 2004, and he was one of the three leads. Um, and that was a big deal in his career. And I think, like I said, a lot of people know him as the comedy guy. He's primarily known for that. He's really fantastic in pretty much everything he does. He normally plays these like either the idiot character, the degenerate, or this slacker type character, but he does it incredibly well. And when he transitioned into the world of podcasting, lo and behold, he does that incredibly well. Um, he's also known for directing. He directed Chips, which came out in 2017, which didn't do too well at the box office, but it's a really funny movie. Hit and Run, which came out in 2012, and his very first film, a film called Brothers Justice, which came out in 2010. He's also directed episodes of the television show Parenthood, and he's directed the show called About a Boy. So he has got a little his little foot dipped into the world of directing. He's also wrote the Brothers Justice film, Hit and Run, and Chips as well. So he's also a screenwriter as well. So he's done a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think people don't give him enough credit. I think he's pretty funny. Um, Next, we have Will Arnett, who's playing Nelson Biederman IV. And this is our character that John Lashitsky is out for revenge for. He's basically an obnoxious rich asshole. Um, his father was the judge that put John away. Um, Not to get too much into the spoiler section quite yet, but his father died before John could get revenge on him. So now he's going after the next best thing, which is Nelson Biederman IV, his son. Um, so it's interesting. He's been in stuff like Ed's Next Move, which came out in '96, which I believe is his first film. He's also did the movie Close Up in '96, and then Arnett did stuff like The Great New Wonderful in '05, Monster in Law in '05, RV in '06, obviously Let's Go to Prison in '06, Blades of Glory in '07, Ratatouille in '07 as well, that Pixar animated movie, which I love. Hot Rod in '07, Semi Pro in '08, Despicable Me in 2010, a great Netflix show called Flaked, which ran between 2016 and 2017. He was a star of that and it was in 14 episodes. And then I think a lot of people know him from Arrested Development. That was, I think, his big breakout thing. And I didn't write any information on that, of course, because I'm an idiot and I forgot to write that. But he played one of the family members and another crazy character and just absolutely hilarious. So definitely check that out as well. Um, we have an actor named David Darlow who's in there briefly, and he plays Judge Biederman, the gentleman that puts away John Lashitsky. He sends John to jail 3 times. You can see why John might be a little bit annoyed. Now, keep in mind, John deserved to go to jail 3 times. Fucking, he's a career criminal essentially, and a bit of a degenerate. Um, he's been in stuff like Miller's Crossing, which came out in 1990, The Fugitive, which came out in '93, Hoodlum, which came out in '97, Ride with the Devil in '99, High Fidelity, which came out in 2007, Road to Perdition in 2002, and The Weatherman, which came out in '05. So he's not in this movie very long, but when he's in the movie, he really stands out. He does a really good job. Now, the next gentleman is an actor named Chi McBride, and he plays the role of Barry. Barry is in charge of a gang called the G Lords, and he's a gentleman that develops a crush on Will Arnett's character, Nelson Biederman IV. And he makes that crush very well known, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Um, he basically forces Nelson to become his girlfriend and eventually, or boyfriend, excuse me, and eventually they end up falling in love. Now, I'm giving you a little bit of spoiler information ahead of time, guys, but I'm still going to tell you about the story and go into further detail for you. He started his career, believe it or not, with the movie Revenge of the Nerds 3 in '92, of all things. He was in The Frighteners in '96, The Great White Hype, which came out in '96, Hoodlum in '97, Gone in 60 Seconds in 2000, The Kid in 2000, iRobot in 2004, Draft Day in 2014, and he's been in a bunch of the Beavis and Butthead episodes, the 2022 and 2023 run. He does a couple different characters in that as well. So he has a nice little resume. He's fantastic in this movie, and another guy that everybody in this movie is just really, really funny. Michael Shannon, I'll talk about next. Now, you guys all know Michael Shannon. He's been in everything. He plays a guy named Leonard in this movie, and he's basically a white supremacist. He's the leader of the white supremacist gang in the prison. And I'll go into more about his character later on. Now, he's been in a ton of stuff, guys. He's been in Groundhog Day. I think that's early on in his career. Chain Reaction in '96. The independent film Jesus' Son, which came out in '99, another Billy Crudup film. So, of course, I have to mention it. The John Waters film Cecil B. Demented, Tigerland in 2000, Vanilla Sky, Man of Steel in 2013. The list goes on and on with this guy. And He also directed a film in 2023 called Eric LaRue, which I have not seen, but I'm always curious when an actor makes the transition from actor to director. So I'm gonna definitely have to check that out, and I recommend you guys do that as well. So that's a little bit about Michael Shannon. I didn't go too much into Michael Shannon because he's one of those actors I think you guys probably already know. Most of the actors in this are pretty well known actors, and I want to give you a taste of their resume just in case you're not familiar with them. But I don't want to go into everything they've done because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Next, we have David Koshner. And David Koshner, I'm probably pronouncing your last name wrong, David, so I do apologize. He plays the head guard. He's a corrupt guard, and his name is Shanahan. And he's been in stuff like the Jamie Foxx show early on in his career in '96, the television show Mad About You, and then he'd go on to stuff like Wag the Dog in '97, Dirty Work in '98, Anchorman in '04, the Dukes of Hazzard movie in '05, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Waiting, Hit and Run in 2012, Cheap Thrills, which is a fantastic, really dark indie comedy. The Goldbergs, he was in that television show. He was in 38 episodes, and he's been in just a ton of other stuff. Great character actor, doesn't get enough love in my opinion, but definitely check out some of his resume. Definitely worth your time, guys. Next, we have Dylan Baker, who plays the warden. Now, he's only in the movie briefly in the beginning and the end. He plays the warden, and of course, like every warden in a prison movie, he's a fucking asshole. Um, he's been in stuff like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Delirious, Last of the Mohegans, Happiness, Requiem for a Dream, The Cell, 13 Days, Changing Lanes, Road to Perdition, Spider-Man 2, and of course the indie horror movie Trick or Treat, which she plays a really dastardly role in that. And definitely check out that film. I'm sure if you're a horror fan, you've probably already seen Trick or Treat, but if you're not, guys, check that out. Great movie. Um, so, with all that said, let's get into the actual film. At the heart of the film, it's a story about two men. They're both idiots and assholes, essentially. One rich, one poor, both morons, effectively, in their own way. We open the film with our main character, John Lashitsky, telling us he's been to prison 3 times, and he's kind of telling us his life story. Um, and he's about to make it his 4th time as he's telling us, the audience, this. He tells the audience how it all began, and he recounts the story of when he was 8. He first got arrested for trying to steal the giant publisher clearinghouse checks. You know, those giant ones that publisher clearinghouse, they have those checks they give to people when they win. Well, we see young John Lashitsky grab one of those, get in a van, and runs to the bank and try to cash it. Well, he gets arrested and he's brought to court for the first time in his life. And this is where he first meets Judge Biederman. And Judge Biederman sentences him to 5 years in juvenile detention. He's probably like 8 or 9 years old at this point. Um, Next, he gets out, and of course, he's a little bit older. He's a teenager, and what does he do? He tries to rob an armored truck, which goes horribly wrong. He gets sentenced to prison for the 2nd time. He gets out of there a couple of years later. Next thing you know, he's getting brought upon the judge again, and he's going to jail for robbing a police car, of all cars to rob, to stealing a police car and going for a joyride. So he finally gets out of jail from his 3rd visit, and he's there for 3 or 4 years, and he's probably in his mid 20s. And like most idiots, assholes, and he's not a total idiot, so I shouldn't even say idiot. Who is he pissed off at? He's pissed off at Judge Biederman for sending him to jail 3 times. So he's dead set against seeking his revenge on this guy, Judge Biederman, who we think is a real dick. And the guy, in all fairness, this Judge Biederman character that we meet, played by, our man, is an asshole. This guy's a dick. So he calls the courthouse and, he wants to know when Judge Biederman's due to show up in court. And so he can start plotting his revenge and against this guy. He just wants to make this guy's life a living hell. Um, Sadly, he finds out that the judge had just died 3 days ago. So of course this enrages him, and he's like beyond pissed. He has it out for this guy. He wants to make this guy's life a living hell. The good news is he does find out that, well, although Judge Biederman is dead, he does have a son that's still alive. And he's like, fuck it, it's not his father, but I'll make his son's life a living hell. And his son's name is Nelson Biederman. And Nelson Biederman is played by Will Arnett. And he finds out that, he's another rich asshole that runs this corporate company. He's the CEO. And basically, he's put in trust of the company. And he's a real dick. So he figures, how can I make this guy's life hell? So he starts following the guy. And one day he sees that Nelson Biederman has to go to this park. They're opening this park that this company that he runs, like I said, he's the CEO for, he's doing the ribbon cutting. And he's on the phone with the people at the office. And he's like, listen, you fucking shitheads, I shouldn't have had to been here to show up for this stupid charity event. You better have my fresca waiting for me when I get off from here and go into the office. And you can see he's just being like a real dick. And this guy probably deserves a little humility and a little swift kick in the butt, if you will. So what ends up happening is, well, he's giving this, bullshit fake speech about how he's so happy to be there and they're so happy to donate the money to make this park a reality. And they're naming it after his father, Judge Biederman the third. What does John Lashitsky, our career criminal, do? He's looking for ways to make life difficult for Nelson. So what does he do? He goes through his car and he rummages it. And of course, he takes money and things that he things might be worth something. He comes across an inhaler for someone with asthma. And what does he do? He pumps out all the stuff out of it. So Will Arnett's character, Nelson Biederman, finished the speech. You could see he's glad to be done. He turns up the radio in his car and he's kind of in a better mood. He's done with the bullshit for the day. When he realizes he's starting to have an asthma attack, and he grabs his inhaler and he pumps it, and he realizes nothing is coming out, and now he's in panic mode. And he doesn't know what he's going to do. Meanwhile, John Lashitsky is following him in his car. So Nelson Biederman, somehow by sheer luck, manages to find a little mom and pop drugstore, and he runs in and he's holding the inhaler, but he's going like this and he's waving his hands in the air. And there's this older Chinese couple, and they just see him waving his hands in the air. And of course, he can't really communicate, but he's hoping that they'll see the inhaler. But instead, they think he's a drug addict because he's running around and he's frustrated because they can't understand him. So he's like looking everywhere on the shelves, just throwing things on the ground, trying to find an inhaler because he thinks he's going to fucking die. And they think he's like coming to rob the place. They're like, oh, another fucking, another drug addict here to rob us again. So, it's a case of miscommunication. Obviously, you got a guy that can't communicate because he's having an asthma attack, and then you have this people that are bitter because they've been robbed before, and they think this guy's acting like a fucking crazy person. So to make matters worse, excuse me, John Lashitsky's in his car, and he fires a gun. And of course, the Chinese guy, the husband, hears this and he thinks that Nelson Biederman has a gun on him. And now he really thinks he's going to rob the place, and that's what he's there for. So he gets his shotgun out, and things are about to get serious. Luckily, the cops get there in time, and they arrest Nelson. And through a series of events, we see him go through the court system, and he's given a trial. But you know what? The people at the company that he works for hate this guy. So they give him the most incompetent lawyer and the most incompetent team to defend him. And through sheer bad luck, and partially through Nelson being obnoxious, like telling the judge, like, hey, I've got lots of money. We know this is going to be a quick trial. And pissing off the judge. He's sent to prison. And at this point, you would think our man John Lashitsky would be thrilled by this. You'd think, oh man, I finally got my revenge. But you realize he had so much fun taking revenge on him And now he's going to be spoiled from that fun. He's not going to have a chance to watch him get tortured and potentially killed in jail. So what does John do? John gets himself arrested. And when he's on trial, he asked the judge to do him a favor. And he said, just, do me a favor, send me to this jail. And it's the same jail that Nelson Biederman IV is going to. When he's there, he meets Shanahan, our head guard, and he throws him some bribe money. And basically, he's put in the same jail cell as Nelson Biederman IV. While he's in this jail cell with Nelson Biederman IV, he basically tries to become friends with him and pretends that he's his buddy and gives him the worst possible advice. And lo and behold, pretty early on, Nelson Biederman is not very well liked. People see him as basically a pussy, a guy that is an easy mark. And we're introduced very early on to Chi McBride, uh, who is playing Barry, the gang leader of the G Lords, and a gentleman who becomes quite smitten by Nelson, um, much to Nelson's dismay. Also, while we're there, um, we're introduced to our character of, hold on one second, guys, because I forgot the name here. Michael Shanahan's character, Leonard. And Leonard, like I said, is in charge of a gang of white supremacists. And one day when they're in the cafeteria, and they're enjoying their lunch, John Lashitsky and Nelson Biederman IV, Leonard ends up getting into a fight and essentially killing a fellow inmate. And our guard, Shanahan, comes up to Nelson Biederman and he says, "Who did this?" And not knowing any better, one thing you never do in jail is you don't never become the snitch. Well, Nelson snitches on Leonard, and from that point on, Leonard is put in the hole for several days, and basically he's very pissed with Nelson, and he vows to kill him. So while this is happening, Barry corners the guy that I told you, the leader of the G Lords, corners Nelson and essentially makes him his girlfriend. And he's a romantic partner. He tries to woo him a little bit. He tries giving him the finest toilet wine that he made himself in his jail cell, and he doesn't take advantage of him right away, but he makes it very clear that basically that Nelson is his, whether he likes it or not. Nelson obviously is not thrilled by this prospect, but what can you do? Barry is a very large African American that's probably 6'3", 6'4", and very heavy set, and doesn't look like the kind of guy you want to really mess with. So you can see that he means business. So just hang tight for 1 second. I lost my place here, guys. And occasionally, I'm trying not to look at my cheat sheet here, but occasionally I do have to look down at it. Just bear with me for 1 second. So eventually, this guy Leonard gets out of jail, or not gets out of jail. He gets out of the hole, and he's out for revenge against Nelson. Nelson goes up to him. He's brave. He says, "Listen, it's just a big misunderstanding. I didn't mean to put you in the hole." He tries to reason with a psychopath. And Leonard says, I respect the fact that you had the ball to come up to me, but I'm going to kill you. And it's going to be not when you expect it. So Nelson is shooting bricks. And while this is going on, John is making life incredibly difficult. He's paying guys to beat up Nelson. Like I said, he's giving him really horrible advice on how to survive in jail, which is making life more difficult for him. But all the while, he's pretending to be his best friend. And all while this is going on, this relationship with Barry is evolving. And he's starting to kind of tolerate Barry a little bit more, even almost like him in a way. And at some point, believe it or not, they actually do become romantic partners, despite his initial being opposed to that. Anyway, eventually Leonard um, goes to face um, Nelson, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill you." Um, what he doesn't realize is Nelson knew that he was going to get killed. So he goes to one of the prisoners there. It's kind of like, you always have that one prisoner that has access to drugs and all sorts of legal paraphernalia. And he's like, listen, I need something that's going to kill me. And he's like, well, what are you looking for? And he ends up on taking basically boat cleaner, and it's in a syringe. So he thinks he's going to kill himself. Um, Before he has that opportunity, our man Leonard, excuse me, corners him in his jail cell. And while he's fighting Leonard, what ends up happening is the syringe falls out of his pocket. And Leonard sees that and he's like, "Oh, you're holding out on me, aren't you?" And he takes the syringe and injects it in his arm. And lo and behold, Leonard is now dead. Now, at this point, Nelson comes out of the jail cell, dragging the body, and he's the man. Everyone's like, don't fuck with this guy. He obviously killed the leader of the fucking white supremacists. He's a badass. He's basically the leader of the white supremacists. Um, Barry tries to move things into the physical department of the relationship. And even though he's become a little bit more inclined to be romantic with Barry, he's not ready to get physically romantic with Barry, and he sends some of his goons to make that quite clear. Like that's not happening. We'll get there at my pace if I want to get there. And it's weird because he still is kind of like progressing the relationship in a romantic kind of way. Um, and some of the stuff I'm talking about, guys, you're missing a lot of the comedy beats because there's a lot of one-liners and a lot of gags going on throughout this movie. And it's very well written in my opinion, despite those Rotten Tomato reviews and the Metacritic reviews. Um, so he's become the badass of the jail, and of course, John sees this, John Lashitsky, and he's pissed because he's like, my job was to make this guy's life a living hell, um, and now he's become the hero. He was hoping that he'd eventually get killed. He was probably thinking Leonard was going to do the job. So John's forced to figure out, what can I do now to make this guy's life a living hell? So Nelson has his parole. This is about a year into his jail stint. He's up for parole. And what does John do? John gives him a little Fresca. And of course, it's drugged. He's knocked unconscious for about an hour or two. And while he's knocked unconscious, he writes on his forehead, "White Power." Uh, he gets up from being knocked unconscious, and of course, he's due for his parole board. And of course, lo and behold, he is rejected. Um, Go figure, right? And he gets back to the cell. He puts it together that John was the one that did this. They get into this big fight. But before things can escalate too seriously, our head prison guard, Leonard, breaks things up and says, "Hey, listen, if you two assholes are going to fight, it's going to be on my terms. It's going to be in the prison yard on Friday, and we're going to take bets on this thing so we can make some money off it." And basically, Nelson says, "Well, what happens to the loser of this fight?" And he's like, "Well, the winner is going to kill the loser, and I'm going to kill whoever the winner is. So either way, you guys are both going to be dead on Friday." So at this point, John and Nelson realize they have to figure out a solution. Um, Now, we don't get that solution until the day of the fight. And what ends up happening, guys, bear with me for a second here, is the day of the fight comes and there's a big brawl in the prison yard. And it's this big, long, drawn out fight. And essentially, the last thing we see is them each stab each other with something. But we don't know at first glance what that is. Cut to a flashback scene where we see Nelson calling up the CEO office and telling him that he's taking back control of the company. And the guy that answers the phones, the lawyer says, "Well, how can you do that? You're arrested. It's illegal." He's like, "Oh, well, some recent events have happened. I've adopted a son. And according to the laws, I can pass that along to my son." And his son, of course, who's none other than Barry. Barry has become his adopted son. Barry takes over and inherits the company and all the money that's associated with the company. And we find out that Barry also bribes the coroner. So this fight happens. They fall to the ground at the same time. We all think that they're dead effectively. After the fight, like I said, Barry bribes the coroner. Later that night, they're buried. We see Barry at the cemetery and he digs up the body of our main band, Will Arnett, Nelson Peterman. And we find out that basically through the prison chemist, they were able to inject themselves with something. They stabbed each other in the fight with needles. The needles had a drug that would just make them appear to be dead for a day. So Barry digs up the body and then he digs up the body of our man, John Lashitsky. They end up giving John a ride. And what happens? They move out to wine country. And a year later, they're running a wine company. And John is their head vineyard guy that makes the wine. I'm probably getting that term wrong. He's the guy that makes the wine for them. And that's our epilogue. And like I said, this movie isn't breaking any huge ground, guys. I think it's a really funny movie. I think it's a movie that I probably didn't describe the best, but I give you a general idea. It's definitely worth your time, guys. So do yourself a huge favor and check that out, guys. So that's today's episode. Um, few podcasts you guys should be listening to is the Not a Bomb guys with Troy and Brad. Last week they talked about, excuse me here, trying to get sitting down a little better here. It's getting uncomfortable there. Not a Bomb stars Troy and Brad. Each week they talk about films that bombed at the box office. Last week they talked about The Dial of Destiny, the new Indiana Jones movie, or came out last year, I think. Um, and then they also, this week they're talking about Wind Talkers, the Nicolas Cage movie directed by John Woo. So that's a great podcast. Definitely worth your time. Then we've got The Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema starring Will and Sam. And these guys just do a great job of talking about all different films. They talk about a lot of different films, films that are a little more obscure, cult films. They talk about some mainstream films, and they really enlightened me and brought to me. I can't make words today, guys. Brought to me attention some films that really deserve some love. And like I said, another great podcast. So check out The Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema with Will and Sam. We have Watch Skip Plus with Alex and Jose. These guys cover all the current stuff currently playing in movie theaters. Last week, they talked about the new Twisters movie. I don't know what they're talking about this week, but I'm sure it'll be great. They also have a skit. No, they also have a plus part of the podcast where they might talk about like a new book or a product that they think you should check out. And like I said, they cover all the current stuff that's playing in theaters. And these guys are also really, really good. Um, Last, I'll talk about Raiders of the Podcast. These boys, I don't know how they do it, but they cover at least two films every episode. And a lot of times they talk about three or four. Like last week, they did a special where they covered four films by the director Gene Roland. And I'm sorry, Gene, I probably got your last name mispronounced horribly. Um, but these guys are also really, really good. So check them out. Um, these are some podcasts that I think are definitely worth your time, guys. And I think you'll really enjoy. Um, I'm going to probably be covering comic book wise. I'm just grabbing it here. The crime comedy Chicken Devil. That's the graphic novel. I'm probably going to talk to you about the first two issues. Hoping maybe tomorrow, if not tomorrow, Thursday. It's a really cool graphic novel. If you like to laugh, if you like dark comedy with crime, it's a perfect combination. So check that out, guys. And I'll be back, like I said, hopefully Friday, hopefully no later than Saturday to talk about Big Stan. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast today. Um, like I said, I don't know if I properly did this film justice. Um, I think I don't want to give too much away. So I tried to kind of not rush, but I tried to give you not go into too much detail. Like I said, there's some great dialogue in this film. Um, I definitely think the whole cast this really works well together. Chi McBride is really great. I really need to see more of his filmography. Will Arnett, man, another guy doesn't get nearly enough love. The guy can do everything. You know, he's done stuff like voiceover stuff for like the Lego movie, Batman Lego. He's just done a ton of different stuff, and I think he's fucking hilarious. And Dax Shepard, like I said, I really came to appreciate him more for the his podcast, Armchair Expert. Um, but he's also just a really fun comedian. And his director movies, the movies that he directed, the two that I've seen, Hit and Run and Chips, I had a really good time with them. I really laughed. Um, but if you listen to the podcast, you realize he's more than just some of these characters that he plays. I know, go figure. He's an actor. He should be more than some of these characters that he just plays. But he's really intelligent, really insightful, and he does a really, really good job of interviewing people. Um, I can't say enough great things about his podcast, Armchair Expert, as well as some of the choices that he's picked as an actor. So do yourself a favor, guys, and check out Armchair Expert. That's another podcast. Definitely add to your list. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you had yourself a great time listening. I hope you guys look forward to more episodes. Like I've told you guys before, if you're interested, I'd love to have you guys. Feel free to reach out to me in the comment section here. You can reach out to me on Facebook through Messenger. Tell me, I'd love to have you join me for an episode, whether it's a comic book episode, even a video game. If there's some music that you think I should be listening to or a game I should be playing, let me know. Comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts are on this episode. I'm open to feedback, guys, positive and negative. If you guys think there's something I could be doing to make this a more immersive experience or a better experience, if there's an element that you think I should be tweaking, let me know. I want to build my audience and hopefully let you guys be a part of that experience. I really want to connect with you guys, my audience, and I want to really make it a fun show. So I'm hoping you guys are enjoying the show, and so far you are getting that experience. But I'm always looking to improve. And I'm always looking, like I said, I'm always looking to have people on. So feel free to reach out to me. Also, if there's something I should be covering, like a movie, let me know, guys. I'm open to any suggestions, okay? So have a great week, and I will see you guys soon with another episode.